Okay, in this video I'm going to share a few thoughts about this bus crash that happened in Newark Penn Station. But first, in a previous video I told you that the way the passenger cars derailed on that Amtrak train crash in Philadelphia actually remind me of how these toy cars tend to derail. But I was actually planning on showing you exactly what they look like when they derail, but I forgot to. So I'm going to do that. First, I'm going to derail the front axle of the front car and have the locomotive push it. Now, I know that in real life, Amtrak usually doesn't push their passenger cars, but the couplers are broken on all of these. That's why they're being pushed. They actually got broken in a terrible derailment where this car did a barrel roll off the tracks and it dragged the other two cars with it. Then they all slid off the bed before I could stop them. And the damage from that crash caused all their couplers to get broken. So yeah, that's why I have to push them from now on. So yeah, with the front car derailed, this is how they derail. That was actually kind of horrifying. Usually they end up dragging this car off the track too when they do that. Now I know what you're thinking. These cars cost $50 a piece. Why are you destroying them? They're actually already destroyed. The way they are, they can't actually be used in real service. I actually ended up replacing them with other cars that aren't Amfleet cars because for some reason I've always had bad luck specifically with Amfleet cars. They're the only passenger cars I've had that are always derailing on this one stretch of track. Anyway, now I'm going to derail the rear axle on the front car and let's see what that looks like. Man, it actually lasted longer this time. It always eventually derails if you don't stop it right away. This time, it derailed the locomotive too, which is weird because usually the locomotive stays on the track in this situation. But in this case, they managed to derail it as well. Well, that's actually kind of horrifying. I would not want to be aboard this train when this happened. Okay, now I'm going to derail the front axle of the second car. The one that's responsible for the derailment that ended up destroying this entire consist when it did a barrel roll off the track. which actually really horrified me actually. I was not expecting to see that happen at all. Anyway. Well, these cars seem extremely prone to derailment. Okay, this time they derailed while I was trying to push them towards the locomotive to couple them again. So now you know why I stopped using these cars. They're too prone to derailment. Like, man, I can't even couple them to each other without derailing them. Anyway, this time I'm going to derail the second axle on the second car. It's usually the second car that derails on this consist too. In fact, it's almost always the second car. Well, now I'm going to derail the front axle of the third passenger car. The one that's attached to the locomotive usually doesn't derail. I'm surprised the lights on these things still work, considering how many times they've crashed. The more you push it, the more it comes off the track. Well, these two are tied together because their couplers are broken. And I can't afford couplers. This time, they've actually managed to derail the rear axle of the locomotive and when they crashed. This time I've derailed the axle that's directly in front of the locomotive. Ah, that's interesting. The train didn't derail this time. Well, actually, the front axle did derail. The rest of the train is still on the track, but this passenger car actually derailed the locomotive. That was another issue I was having with these cars. They would derail the locomotive sometimes. This time I derailed the front axle of the locomotive. Yeah, it's usually not an issue when the locomotive derails because it just stops. When the passenger cars derail, they just, you can't even save them. Like, even if you stop the train right away, they're still gonna come off the track. And that's why I've retired them from service and use them only for crash testing now. Anyway, as for this crash that happened in Newark Penn Station, the only thing I can really say about it is I'm not actually that surprised. And here's why. When I was a truck driver, we were warned about the bus drivers. We were told that they tend to be, you know, not careful. And there are actually other reasons why a bus driver operating his vehicle in such a way that it resulted in a crash with another vehicle doesn't surprise me. And that is, well, before you understand this, you must first understand how bus drivers drive in the area that I live. Now, I have a story to tell. It's actually a true story about a specific time where I was riding a bus, and I got to a point where I did not feel as though the driver was operating safely. Now, this is a hospital called St. Luke's Hospital. There's a bus stop here that's serviced by 2 routes. I was riding on one of them in order to get home from work. Now, the bus was driving down Emmerich Boulevard. It crossed the intersection with Freemansburg Avenue, continued straight. Now, the buses usually make a U-turn here in order to get to the bus stop, which is over here. Now, this one bus driver that I was driving with, I actually specifically don't like this driver because she steps on the brakes so hard that if you happen to be holding a cell phone upright when she steps on the brakes, the phone will think you rotated the screen, and it will flip the screen so that the bottom of the screen is facing the front of the bus if you're on one of those sideways facing seats. It does that because the driver is putting so much G-force on the phone that it thinks gravity is sideways. So yeah, for that reason, I really don't like this driver. She actually annoys me. In fact, like, man, she steps on the brakes so hard, it feels like all the blood in your body is rushing towards the right side. Like, it just doesn't, like, you will think that you are being trained at NASA to handle very high G-forces if you're riding this bus. Anyway, this bus was driving down this street, about to make the U-turn. She makes a U-turn so fast that it actually feels like the bus is tilting towards the outside of the curb. I was actually holding on for dear life because I was convinced that the bus was going to tip over at that point, and I was terrified. Now, she was making that U-turn basically, I'll say she was making it a lot faster than I would have. So yeah, I actually don't think bus drivers in general are safe or when they operate their vehicle. So and for that reason, it actually does not surprise me, this bus accident that I saw in Newark. So I was looking at the video that New Jersey Transit released of this accident, and it's actually very shocking. I was looking at how fast the bus was going when it hit the other one. I'm like, why is it going that fast? Now, little is known about this accident at this time, and I'm not the type of person that just points fingers or tries to point the blame on anyone. So I'm not going to blame the driver in this accident. I'm just going to tell you what initially it looks like is going on when I look at the video. You know, the first thoughts that go through my mind. However, still, I'm not going to actually try to point the blame at anyone. It looks the bus was going pretty fast. It looked like maybe the light turned yellow on him. Maybe he was trying to you know, race the yellow light to get to the other side before it turned red. Now, bus drivers actually do that very often where I live. They're actually infamous for racing across yellow lights, trying to beat them before they turn red. That's why that's the first conclusion that came to my head. It's something that happens very often where I live. But it's possible that that's not the case. Like, you know, that's not the only possible thing that could have happened. Maybe it's possible that the bus that got hit ran a red light. I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be this driver's fault. Maybe his light was green and this bus moved in front of him running a red light. I mean, maybe he could be the one that's at fault for this accident. Who knows, really? So yeah, I'm not going to try to point the blame at anyone in particular for this accident at this time, especially not without knowing more information. In fact, that's the main problem the news media has. They point blame at people without actually knowing what happened yet. So yeah. So when I was telling you about the running the red light thing, another story came to mind, which is also a true story that actually happened to me. This is a Walmart Supercenter in Nazareth, Pennsylvania. It is serviced by 3 bus routes. I was riding one of them in order to get home after doing some grocery shopping. Now, all of these routes cross Pennsylvania State Route 248 in order to go into another bus stop that's inside the Target parking lot across the street. There is a traffic light at this intersection, as you can see. Very poorly. Anyway, so yeah, this bus is driving down this road about to cross the street. The light turns yellow. The bus, instead of slowing down, tries to race the yellow light in order to get to the other side before it turns red. But it turns red too quickly, so he has to make an emergency stop to avoid either being stuck at the intersection or running a red light. So, when he makes this emergency stop, pretty much everybody on board very nearly falls off their seats, including an old lady. So yeah, that specific way of handling a vehicle, that kind of got on my nerves, because I'm like, dude, you're putting everyone in danger, even an elderly person. Like, you should be ashamed of yourself for the way you were operating this vehicle. And you know what the driver said after that happened? He said, "That's funny. Usually the buses I drive, they can make it through that light in time." And I'm like, that doesn't mean you're supposed to do it though. Like, in the CDL manual, it clearly says that with trucks and buses, you're not supposed to try to race the yellow light. You're supposed to, in fact, it even goes out to say, if the light has been green for a long time, slow down before you get to it, because there's a good chance it's going to turn red before you get to it. So he should have been slowing down, prepared to stop, with the assumption that it was going to turn red. He was not supposed to be traveling at normal speed, and he definitely wasn't supposed to be racing the yellow light. So yeah, that's actually something that happens very often where I live, and the buses in this area are actually infamous for the specific way they drive. And that's why I'm not necessarily too surprised when I look at this bus crash. Because a lot of the bus drivers I ride with, sometimes I fear that they are going to get me in a horrible accident while I'm riding the bus. So yeah, if the bus drivers in Newark drive like the bus drivers in this city, this isn't really too surprising to me.